This is an Audacy original.
This is the War in Ukraine Daily. I'm Charles Feldman.
I'm Mike Simpson from the KNX Audacy studios in Los Angeles. On today's podcast, Russia's military strikes further to the west, bringing danger close to the border with Poland.
Ukrainians in the capital city of Kyiv are preparing for the worst.
And an American rabbi now in Poland helping Ukrainian refugees. But we start with Russia's invasion becoming even more violent. Forces continue moving towards Kyiv. They've started attacking areas in western Ukraine with rocket strikes. Phil Ittner is in Lviv, Ukraine. Phil, things have been relatively quiet where you are, but that's changing?
Yeah, we've had a relatively quiet period for the last, the better part of over a week. But over the weekend, several air raid sirens blaring here in Lviv because apparently cruise missiles headed to a town about 30 miles west of where I am, very close to the Polish border, where international fighters were coming and registering and doing some training, but in addition to that, an airfield as well, and perhaps a weapons stockpile. So that may have been an isolated incident, but nevertheless, people in this town are starting to get a little bit anxious, thinking perhaps the war is headed our way.
Yeah, how surprised are people that it happened, especially some of those strikes right there so close to the Polish border, NATO territory. Some of the TV shots of Lviv show plenty of people just kind of life as usual, going to cafes and doing things, but then when sirens are going off, that's a whole different kind of perspective.
Well, we've just today, just within the last 2 hours, have had two more siren events. So it is ongoing. And yeah, you're right. Over the weekend, people did kind of go out on the town. And Mike Charles, I have a YouTube channel, which is simply my name, Philip Ittner, 1 L and Philip and 2 T's and Ittner, where I was out yesterday kind of walking amongst the people in Lviv, and there's almost a desperation, almost a sense of anxiety to try and hold on to normality as long as they possibly can. So they were out with their children. There's an ice skating rink in the middle of town. There were musicians out, trying to kind of raise people's spirits. But you scratch beneath the surface, and people are starting to get quite anxious here.
Fellas, I'm sure you know the president of Ukraine is going to have a virtual address to the U.S. Congress on Wednesday. Now, I know he wants, because he said it, a no-fly zone. That's probably not going to happen. What else could be on his laundry list, his shopping list?
Well, he's definitely going to ask for weaponry, but I think the message that he will send is a message I've heard from many, many Ukrainians that I've spoken to since I've arrived here, and I've been coming here for 21 years, and since this war began, I came back because I made various promises to many friends here that I would do so and bear witness. And what I'm hearing from many people, and the message I suspect we'll hear from President Zelensky on Wednesday when he talks to Congress, is you may not have a choice here. The war has started, and it will affect you. That's what I'm hearing from many Ukrainians, that the West doesn't get it quite yet. That when Putin attacked Ukraine, he didn't just attack Ukraine. He was going to have ramifications throughout the Western world. And the message he has said repeatedly, and again I've heard from Ukrainians here on the ground, is you just don't know it yet. We're the front lines. We're the first guys who are going to be attacked, but don't doubt for a second that he's just going to stop with Ukraine.
Journalist Phil Ittner back with us in Lviv, Ukraine. Phil, thanks.
The war in Ukraine putting millions of civilians who are just trying to survive in danger, and people in Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv, they are bracing for the worst.
Russia's convoy has been slowed as it moved towards Kyiv, but it looks like they're now trying to surround the capital. Tim Milovanov, professor at the University of Pittsburgh, he's from Ukraine, now just outside of Kyiv. Professor, we understand you were in the bomb shelter earlier today.
I had some panel discussion at the UCLA, 1,000 people on the call, and I just give 2 minutes intro. And there is it's not a training, it's a air raid, it's real, it's rockets, Masal, please shut down the windows, switch off the lights, go to the basement immediately. So it's fun. You have to, like in the military, you have the time usually between the announcement and the landing of missiles is 2 minutes. So you have to pack and dress and get everything you need, assuming that you will never come back within 2 minutes.
How often is that happening?
It depends on the area. Some people do it several times a day. We have been relatively lucky where we are. It happens. This type of warning, severe warning, happens maybe every couple of days.
Have you thought about leaving Kyiv? Is it possible for you to leave Kyiv and head west?
Well, as I said, I'm sufficiently far away from Kyiv, from the activities, so I'm safe. I can move further west. That's no problem, but it doesn't really matter because Russia now bombards, capriciously, I think, almost.
But when you say you're far, and how many miles are we talking about in terms of what's your definition of far?
Far, it means that I am not within, let's say, 20 miles or 30 miles of active military activities.
20 miles, okay.
All right.
20, 30 miles.
So kind of a suburb-type situation.
Yeah,
so
suburb versus suburb, but it can really get nasty very quickly. But the rockets is the worst because now the ground troops are basically stuck. Russian ground troops, they're advancing here and there and then get pushed back. But it's really these rockets, and they are now, we have daily meetups, checkups, and meetings with the management of the Kyiv School of Economics and the president there. And, a typical morning goes like this, 8 vice presidents and 3 are reporting that rockets hit next to them, but they're okay. So that's a typical morning check.
So what is that like in a daily life kind of sense? I mean, just the surrealness of it. And then also, I mean, if you think, okay, well, maybe I should pack up and go even further, well, then, you could be back in a danger zone before you know it and not even realize it. Yeah,
so there, first of all, humans apparently adapt to almost everything very quickly. I think the first 2 weeks, it feels like a sprint, like you're running 100 meter in Olympics, and you feel that right now your heart is gonna give out and just gonna fall because you don't have any energy, you don't have enough oxygen. But then after that, you get into this marathon feel, and it's different type of perseverance that you need, like to make another step. There's no immediate danger, but it's the same over and over, and it puts pressure on you, and you need to find. Some people collapse under it, others, find a way. The trick I did to my company, and I learned it in the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed and later in 2014, you actually have to make everyone work on important projects really, really hard so everyone is occupied, and then their mental health is better and people can actually function. But you just get used to it.
Tim, when we talked with you last week, I believe you were still teaching virtually. Are you still doing that?
Correct. I did connect with the Pittsburgh students. I haven't done it since that because it was a little bit hectic, but I would very much like to do it. I was supposed to go back on April 1st to teach classes for 3 weeks. And, my faculty, my friends, my fellow instructors will pick it up. But good that you reminded me. I'll connect with my students and try to teach a lecture too.
A little bit hectic is
that's probably an understatement. Yes, a little
right?
hectic, huh?
I mean, well, I'm sure they would love to see you and hear from you. But obviously, and they're probably going to have questions. What would you talk about in terms of what you're experiencing with them, or in the economic side, the sanctions against Russia? What would class be like for you right now?
The last class, they were just shocked. They were shocked to see me because it's, they read it in the news. And before that, I was already kind of exotic enough for them as a faculty. I'm an economist, but at the same time, I was in the government and, I talked to the president. It's a big deal for kids, And I get them to, expose them to kind of thinking which is done in real policy making, decision making, and say, this is not what quite the university teach. The real writing is different, the real thinking is different. This is an example. And the funny thing, the ironic thing, before going to Ukraine, I give them an assignment to think of the scenarios, whether there will be a war or not, and what they think the Putin has done. And I have not graded it, and I probably won't be, but I wonder if anyone got it right. So probably I will give them an assignment to reassess their scenarios, go back to what they have written and say, given in the light of new information, how should have they written that analysis and that assignment? Because that would kind of force them to think about what assumptions they had right and what assumption they had wrong. That's assuming I would have the state of mind and time and capacity to teach them that.
Right. Yeah. I want to talk about, you mentioned some people, it's a sprint and some people it's a marathon and some people collapse under it. How are people holding together? I mean, you sound like you're doing okay given the circumstances around you, in your friendship group, in some of the peers that you have there. I know you're a bit out of town, but still, you've got the sirens. I mean, how are people doing, as far as you can tell, living under this for all this time now?
People are different. It's like different people cope differently with trauma of war or any trauma for that matter. But trauma is difficult, of course. We have focused our energy on helping people. We are fundraising. We're getting medical kits. These are special medical kits, which most people right now in Ukraine die from blood loss after shelling, because the shelling comes in, let's say a munition, cluster munition falls, or a ballistic missile drops on your building. Unless you die immediately, if it hits you or you're really close, most likely there will be some stuff flying into you, either this cluster, flags, shrapnel, or something heavy, and then people essentially get cut. And they start losing blood, and you have 20 people or 100 people immediately losing blood. And if you don't have those medical kits to kind of immediately stop chemically and sometimes with some mechanical devices blood loss, then most of these people will die. And it's real, because just simply no capacity for emergency service people.
Tim,
sorry.
I'm curious about something, because you were talking about you were talking about how it affects different people in different ways, and I am curious how it's affecting you. And I'm asking you because what you said before about it being hectic, and as Mike pointed out, sort of an understatement. You're in the middle of a war zone, and the way you're kind of rattling stuff off is very clinical sounding. Is that your sort of defense mechanism? Is that how you are dealing with this?
Perhaps I put myself to work, and I have always done that in my life. I really do a lot of work, and some other people cry, and other people, just desperate. But I think everyone around me in my company, I've made them work, and that helps them. I think it's then they actually read, they read less news.
Keep them busy.
There is little they can do about it, about the news. And if they sit, the people become zombies. They kind of keep reading and watching news over and over, and then after that they become dysfunctional. So we have to make them work, and you're right, that's probably my defense mechanism.
Does the worry creep in, though, in a long term, like what is the end game here? What happens? Do they eventually, the Russians take over, and then there's some resistance? Do we have to live under them? Do we win? I mean, does that stuff still get into your head?
No, I think it's different. The messages Putin sent to us is of the type that remind us of how the Soviets ruled Ukraine, especially before the World War II, where we had this Holodomor, where they bombed our churches. For example, one iconic church in the East yesterday was bombed. Then they bombed a training center really close to the Polish border in the western Ukraine. So sending a message to everyone, you're not safe anywhere. Even if you are sitting on the Polish border, 14 miles from the Polish border, you can be bombed. And in Kherson, where Russian troops occupy Kherson, they are snatching people. I have a friend there, and he said just 20 of people I know have been arrested. And I asked him, have they, are you sure they have been arrested? He says, we are hoping they have, because we have not seen them ever since. So the message which is being sent to us is submit fully, and you might die anyway, even if you submit. So everyone understands that it's going to be like it was under the Soviets, and it means more people will be dying. So if our choice is to die either way, then we can as well fight. And I think we want freedom, and we will be fighting because of that, because unlike most of the rest of the world, we truly understand what Russia has become. And it's a very dark place. And to resist it, to survive, we have to fight it.
Tim, we're going to run out of time, but I do want to ask you, because we didn't the last time, do you have a family? And if so, are they with you now?
Yeah, my wife is next to me. Yeah.
Next to you?
We don't have children, but my wife is here.
And how is she dealing with all this?
She's working too. She started napping now.
Okay.
All right, Tim Milovanov, there on the kind of suburban area of Kyiv, away from at least some of the danger. Tim, thank you again for coming back and talking to us. We wish you the best, and we hope you stay safe, and we hope we can speak again soon.
Coming up right after a short break, we hear from an American rabbi who has traveled to Poland to help Ukrainian refugees. A prominent American rabbi is in Warsaw, Poland right now, leading a group of about 20 rabbis to provide medical supplies and more to Ukrainian refugees.
Joseph Potasnik, Executive Vice President of the New York Board of Rabbis, families from Poland, they survived the Holocaust. He spoke to Bridget Quinn on 1010 Winds in New York City.
So just returning to Warsaw from the border, from Mendika, which is on the border of Ukraine and Poland, and we see people crossing the border seeking safety, and to witness the devastation on their faces. You see families that have gone through such horror, who don't know if they're going to be reunited with loved ones, because many of the men could not accompany them because they have to fight up to the age of 60. They have to fight in Ukraine. So you have families that have been separated. I met a gentleman who's 95 years old, crossing the border, Holocaust survivor, who's now going through this second Holocaust in his life.
Oh, my goodness.
And I have to say, but I was heartened by the response. There is a response here. We came through UJA Federation. There is a response here. The global support system of so many humanitarian groups is something that, to me, shows that decency is much greater than indecency in this world. So, but we're glad we're here. We're sorry to see what we're seeing. At least we can give some strength and support. It's called the theology of presence, where you're there. It's not what you say. It's the fact that people see you caring about them.
And, Rabbi, can you tell us, we had reports over the weekend that the fighting on the part of Russia, the attacks on the part of Russia have gotten so dangerously close to the Polish border. Do the people who you've seen, have they been able to get where they need to go safely so far, or is there the fear that at any moment there could be a strike?
There is that fear. Some there was a loss of lives, and some just barely escaped. And you don't know what's going to happen. But many people feel if they stay where they're staying, they can't survive. So better to risk running to the Polish side than to stay on the Ukrainian side. This is really a very, very difficult, debilitating situation. I'm a refugee. I was born after the war in Germany. My parents lost loved ones in the Holocaust. So I feel, a certain responsibility to them to be here. The chief rabbi of Poland said something. He said, we Jews, we're good at being refugees, but we've never been able to help refugees until now. And I think that's very, very telling. But you have to see, you walk by, you see Jewish humanitarian groups, Christian humanitarian groups, everyone comes out to say, we are here to give you whatever help we can during this very, very tough time.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says the situation is becoming more dire for civilians in Ukraine, with many having to make do with almost no food or medicine as the war continues. They are calling for an immediate ceasefire to allow for civilians to get out of the country, but so far, talks between Russia and Ukraine have not made much progress. A spokesperson for the Red Cross saying these people have dealt with a nightmare which, and I'm quoting now, needs to stop now.
This is an Audacy original. Find us and others on the Audacy app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher.